This Monday evening, and a warm welcome to the General Public Affair. As you know, as per tradition, the General Public Affair rather is the public, by the public, for the public. And yes, conversations are continuing this week. As you know, last week we introduced our brand new feature called African Insight, which is also a module, but today the conversations are carrying on, and today I am joined in by Khethu Xaba, which is going to be having a conversation with us and giving us her perception and more insights on the module and what the module is about. Good evening, Khethu.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing this evening? Are you? It seems like you're quiet. Are you nervous?
I'm just ruminating on all these tasty topics we're going to be talking about. So want to jump in.
Before we jump into week two, I'd like us to reflect on last week's show on the burning question, which was what is Africa or African rather. So I'd like to know from you personally, what is Africa or being African?
Okay, for me, what is Africa? It's I look at it from an identity perspective. So I come from a deep identity. What can I say? Studies. So I've studied a lot on what is identity, how is it constructed, and so forth. So for me to answer the question, the first thing I'd look at is the identity.
Identity.
Yes. So what I mean by that, I look at identity in two parts, as in continuity and discontinuity. So as Africans, we've got a shared culture, a shared history, and a shared past. So that is the continuity part. But then we also have a form of discontinuity, where we start becoming nationals within the African border, where we start becoming separated, where now South Africa and Ghana no longer have the exact same future going forward. Even though we are a people who've been dragged through slavery, colonization, and with South Africa now, we go to apartheid. So that continuity and discontinuity is really important in understanding who we are.
So what you're insinuating is their creation of borders has sort of like detached us from what Africa really is, or the African experience.
Yes, it has, because Africans, we are a social people. We're a social people. Our histories and our philosophies are inscribed in rituals. We Africans didn't think to write things down, because as Africans, we believed that, we perform what the knowledge we have. We perform it in rituals, like when we have a wedding, members and all those things. So It's a social gathering. It's not something where we needed to be bearers of knowledge on our knowledge. We needed to just share the knowledge in a social way.
Okay, before we carry on the conversation, you can rather join in on the conversation on Twitter at UJFM, at Smevzinto, hashtag the General Public Affair, hashtag African Insight. Today I'm not alone in studio. I am joined in by Khethu Xaba, which will rather be delivering insights on what being an African is, and going on and giving us a bit on African philosophies. And carrying on, what is the significance of students doing the African Insights module?
Okay, well, the first thing is to disabuse students of the notion of Africa as a footnote in its own past. The way African history has been taught, the way it's been structured in our schools, in our universities, we haven't really learned about Africa. I mean, you could go to SS tomorrow morning and ask students, for instance, which was the first country in Africa to get its independence? Who was Kwame Nkrumah? Who is Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? Who is Thomas Sankara? They don't know these stories. Students know a sort of a Disney production of our history as South Africans. We just know the part that is politically correct to know. We know Nelson Mandela because Nelson Mandela is a good story. We don't really know very well about colonization, apartheid, slavery. We have a rough idea. If you compare that to our knowledge of, say, Western history, like World War II, World War I. Students are more knowledgeable about that. They know exactly what was going on there, more than they know about colonization.
So basically what you're saying is the problem is woven within our education system and how history is taught.
The way we've been taught about our history has been very sparse. That's what I'm saying. So students need to learn more. That's why we're having these movements now where students want more African knowledge. They want decolonization of universities, because they're saying what's going on right now, we're not happy with it. We want more. We want a voice of Africa in what we're taught and who we are.
I'm glad that you mentioned decolonization, but I'd like to know from you, what is decolonization and what view do you have of a decolonized society?
Okay, so firstly, in answering what is decolonization, we must remember that our schools and our universities have been, are sort of set in a way to produce a labor force. A labor force that can work in a big company here in South Africa, an international company, or a small NGO. So we go through these systems and we sort of get shaved off who we are. We are taught how to fit into the system so that we are good workers. So decolonization is doing away with that. It's students wanting first economic freedom in schools. So you don't want to be going to school and then have a debt that you're going to be settling for the next 15 years. As students will say, no, that's wrong. We have inherited a past that is instantly putting us at a disadvantage. And we're saying the university space is not conducive to us, in the sense that I, as a black student who's coming from the rural area, when I come to a university, I have to check myself. I have to leave everything that I celebrate back home back there. And I have to, go from being Khethu Xaba to being Kiru Xaba, in order to fit into these spaces that are symbolically violent to our identities.
But I believe that in order for us to achieve it, we have to know it. And I feel like a whole lot of people have a different perspective or perception of what decolonization is, and what are we exactly decolonizing? Is it only limited to our institutions of learning, which are higher institutions of learning rather?
Not necessarily just the institutions, but the institutions of learning are where we start. Before we go to the big companies, we need to have been educated in a decolonized space, in a space that is comfortable for students. Students don't feel at home at universities. University is a place you go to go and get your degree, and then you come out of it. Students need to do more than learning at university, do more than textbook learning. We need to know the reason why we're learning. That's why you see a lot of students who drop off from, undergraduate to the postgraduate level, because we've been taught how to just cram this theory, write it in tests, but we don't really know the process of why we're learning. So just to
narrow it down, I'd like to know how would the decolonized university be like, in terms of how would academics change from what it is right now? So basically what you're saying, even the curriculum that is taught right now is colonized curriculum, and how do you start decolonizing? Which tools are you going to use, where you live in a society that is constructed on colonial fundamentals? Okay. Because even the language of instruction that we're communicating in right now is a colonial language.
Yes. So one of the first things that has to happen in decolonization is fees. Students cannot afford the exorbitant fees of higher education, and we shouldn't have to. As South African students, we shouldn't have to bear such a heavy burden alone. So that's the first thing that has to happen. Second thing that has to happen is curriculum. South Africans and Africans in general have to be taught about our history. We have to start putting importance in African knowledge, so that at the end of the day, we're not competing to be at the same level as your Ivy League universities, because in honesty, they'll never grant us that equality. No university in South Africa will ever be as great as your Harvard or your Yales, all of these universities. So we'll never get there. So we shouldn't be striving. We shouldn't be breaking down our own Africanism to strive for something we can't get. And then also, secondly, it must be a place where we fit in. South Africa, we sort of sell the whole image of rainbow nation.
I understand, but we've been living Africa like based on Eurocentric information, or information from Eurocentric archives. So when we start decolonizing our academic content, where are we sourcing the Afrocentric or African content from? Is it already there? Because when something falls, I believe that something has to rise.
Yes, we have a great plethora of African insights and African philosophies. We have a lot of academic written texts on it. But also it creates a space for Africans to create more knowledge. If you're saying that it's not enough, then yes, the young Africans who are coming up, in the next 3 years, we will have filled a void in our own knowledge, in our own construction of what academia is. I mean, you look at just what happened recently with the first guy to write a dissertation in Xhosa to be accepted.
Yeah, but I understand. But this information in this day and age is something that is controlled. And my question was, where are we going to source the information? Are there channels of like where we can get our true or authentic African history? And even the question of how African is African, in a way, if I may say, in brackets, because you find in the past where when you look at history, Africa was not even called Africa before. It was named after a Roman general, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so the first part of your question, where do you get the knowledge? Okay, like I said, we go to great writers like your Mudimbes, we go to your writers like Fanon, we go to your writers like Stuart Hall, we go to your writers like Biko. We don't have a shortage of this knowledge that you're asking where we can get it. It's just about legitimizing it.
Okay.
Saying that Biko is enough. Biko doesn't have to compete with Marx. They serve two different avenues.
There's certain philosophies and insights that are within the African Insights module. Do you mind sharing some of them?
Yes. So it's looking at, firstly what we're looking at is what is Africa. Looking at also dynamics of feminism, why we should all be feminism, looking at stuff like LGBTQI. It's about looking at this sort of these sort of university approved themes of knowledge, especially in the social sciences, but then adding the African narrative to it. So saying that you don't have to learn feminism just by learning Judith Butler. That's not the only way to learn feminism. There are great feminists in South Africa, in Africa, that we can imbue into the narratives of Butlers and...
Okay, as a student listening out there, what are some of the topics that the student will encounter within the module African Insights?
Like I said, we'll be looking at stuff like who are Africans? What are Africans? Who has a legitimate claim to being African? Especially if you look at recently with the whole Rachel Dolezal.
That's quite interesting, but we'll get into that after just a short music break. But for now, good music advice coming your way. And please do stay tuned in rather, because we still have your classic generation team coming through with your entrepreneurial issues. But for now, good music, good vibes.